Well, we're going to get started, and as other people come, we'll let them into the room. But good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Bring on the Spotlight. I'm your host today, Jan Sykes, coming to you from Texas in the United States. Filling in for our regular host, Wendy Scott, who is away. This segment of Bring on the Spotlight is being sponsored by Slimmer by author Wendy Jane, the 2020 KCTI International Literary Awards Grand Prize winner. We're so proud of Wendy. And we're going to learn more about her book a little bit later in the show. So thank you everybody for joining us in the gallery. Your mics will remain muted while I chat with our guest. And then I'll open the floor for questions and comments throughout the show. And of course, you have the chat window. So if you think of something and you want to get it in there, just type it into the chat window, and we'll try to make sure all your questions are answered. So gracing us with her presence today from Oak Park, Michigan, USA, is Shirley Harris Slaughter, author of the historical biography, Our Lady of Victory, the saga of an African-American Catholic community. Shirley, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jan.
Well, we're happy that you're here. Sounds like you've had a hectic morning, but we're going to try to make this as wonderful for you as we can make it.
I feel like I went to work today.
Yes. Well, it's great to have you on the show. So I want you to talk a little bit about yourself. It says in your bio that you love trains, vintage clothes, and old buildings with historical architectural significance. So tell us a little more about being a community activist.
I kind of fell into it after I got grown. I was not a history person. In fact, I had no interest in history whatsoever. And that's courtesy of our teachers. They just didn't teach anything that was that I could relate to. So I didn't like it. So I kind of discovered history and discovered the idea that I could appreciate well-built buildings. And so that kind of led me into trying to save things. Like we had our train station here in Detroit that was in disrepair. And so my mother, having come to this state from California, she was pregnant with me and she came by train. So I felt like I was touched in the womb. So I always had this love affair for trains, so I tried to save this train station. And as you've probably seen some of my blogs, I went around, I did a book about a citizens action group that I decided to share what I did to do that, to try to save that station. So that's one of the many things about history that I like. So it was just inevitable that I was going to write about my church, because I felt like the history was about to be destroyed and that I wouldn't get a chance to, no one would get a chance to know that it was once there. And I just finished a Zoom meeting on historic designation for the area, as I mentioned to you all. So it's just crazy how stuff is all happening on the 19th of this month.
Well, it's all good stuff though. And what you said about the way history is taught in school, I totally agree with you. To me, it was very boring. I had to memorize dates and places, and once I memorized them and took the test, I was done.
Yeah. Yes. It's good you could take a test. I couldn't even do that. I was so bored.
So you've been married to Langston for some time. Tell us how you two met.
It was kind of a accident. I was selling, I was a single mom, and I was selling Amway because I wanted to make some money. So my girlfriend, whose husband had got me into it, got this party going with my sister, who's supposed to try to get on today. My other sister, Joyce is one of my sisters, and my other sister, Connie, is supposed to be coming on. Connie did a meeting, And an old boyfriend of mine gave this meeting, and he invited these friends of his, which were three brothers. And one of the three brothers was my husband. We didn't get off to a good start at all. It was negative. And then he asked for me to do a meeting for him. But what he was really trying to do was get to know me better. And so I asked him, I said, what is your intentions? Because I knew if one thing about a relationship, if you don't find out initially what's going on, you're going to be expecting one kind of expectation and they're going to be expecting another. So he told me he wanted to marry me just like that, out the clear blue sky. So that made me take a second look at him as either he's crazy or let me find out what's going on. So it progressed from there. We started going out and we quickly, within 6 months, we were married. And that's how it happened.
I see another book there, Shirley.
Yes, I can tell.
I want to take a minute and let's look at the chat and see what our guests are saying so far. One thing that caught my attention is Maura Beth Brennan says she's baking right now and running back and forth. I can almost smell it. I don't know what she's baking, but I love that.
Yes.
Wanda Fisher says that she was not happy with history in school because of all they left out. That is so true, Wanda. They yeah.
I think we all didn't. I guess we all lost out because history was not told correctly, and
True.
We all lose.
True, and you're right. We all lost out.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Garcia actually has a question for you, Shirley. She says the initial motivation was the Catholic Church. How has this helped you choose your writing genre, and will you continue to write historical books?
I didn't quite understand the question again. What was it?
I think what she's asking you is that, you know, your initial book was Our Lady of Victory, correct?
Correct.
That was your first book.
Correct.
So
well,
I think that
was an initial book, but I was writing all the time. I was writing speeches. I was writing short stories for classes, college classes. One story I wrote was about language and how it can impact us as a society, either positively or negatively. And I don't know where it is. I tore up the house trying to find it, but I did a lot of writing that was interesting. It nothing to do with writing characters, that kind of writing. It was just everyday real stuff, or doing projects or doing assignments or doing classwork. So I did write before I actually wrote this first book.
When we since we've started down that road, hold the book up again, Shirley, so everyone can see the beautiful new cover.
Yeah, this is a new cover. I had to redo the whole book because when I moved from one publisher to another, they kind of lost some files. They lost photos. They had the gall to change some of the content. I was just outraged about what was happening. So I had to go through the whole initial file that I had and redo it, and then reformat it. And I couldn't use all the photos that I had because it's too expensive now to do 60 some photos. So True. I did half of that.
Okay.
And got the
all
same
right.
result. And I made some updates.
Just a side suggestion, those photos that you weren't able to use, you could certainly use them and do some blog posts. That would be kind of fun.
Well, I have a PowerPoint display of all the photos because I used it in an event that I had at the Detroit Public Library. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation of them, some kind of way I could present those.
So I just read the book, and I have to tell you that my hat is off to you for the way that you detailed and put in chronological order all of the events and the way they took place. You truly did preserve history. So one of the things that you've said is that we are not mentioned in the pages of history along with other Catholic churches. that sprung up during the World War II era, and that needed to be corrected. So just kind of for the people who haven't read Our Lady of Victory, kind of run it down to everybody.
Well, what I did was I started to document and do research. Actually, I would go up to the church and pull files out and sneak them home, write up as much as I could out of it and run the files back to church because I wasn't supposed to take it out. But the deacons allowed me to do it. He said, we'll just keep this between you and I, because they didn't want me to take the files out. So I ended up just doing research. And then I ended up, what I was going to do was just talk about the pioneers. I wasn't going to do anything like what I ended up doing. And the reason it turned into the book that it turned into was my editor. She said, why don't you write your story? I said, because I'm not talking about me. She said, why not? You're writing the book. And I wasn't trying to write a novel. I was just trying to do a historical book, So she said, well, you need to write your story. So I sat down and banged my story out in about 3 nights because I had it in my head all these years. I just banged it out. And there was very little editing that needed to be done to it. But it was, the whole thing was edited by the publisher. I may be running off of what you were saying. I'm not sure what
No, you're doing fine.
But that's
doing fine. So I feel like you've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but as you went, obviously you had a strong motivation to do this. There was some reason, there was something pushing you. You were the chosen one to share this history, obviously, because you were being pushed.
Yes, I was being pushed by this inner voice.
Exactly.
Signs kept popping up all over the place to say you need to do it. But what really got me was the Archdiocese decided to do a commemoration of 150 years, I guess, in the region. And they were putting all the parishes in there and telling their little story. But when it got to Our Lady of Victory, all they had was a paragraph, a photo up there and a paragraph. And I said, where's the rest of it? So I called the diocese and he said, well, maybe you should get something down here. Well, he shouldn't have said that because that's exactly what I decided to do. And when I went down there, I found stuff in that folder that I don't think they wanted anybody to know about. Honestly, I was digging up mystery. And so I said, and I was only doing it because there was a gentleman that wrote a thesis on the church and the region. And I got his copy of it. And he was talking about this conspiracy that was going on. I said, no, I can't put that in the book unless I have some proof. So I went down there and I found the proof. So wow. And so that's when Nani started reading the book, she said, oh my God, it looks like a cover up going on.
For sure.
And that's not how I wanted it to go, but I'm not going to hide history just because I'm running across something that I can't, I didn't do, And so I said, please don't shoot the messenger. So when Nani read that, she knew she had to read the book and do a review on it.
Well, and so one of the questions over in the chat room is if the book is in paperback. And so I just posted the purchase link. Let's see, I think Linnea asked that. Yes, it is available in paperback, Linnea. Yeah. If you click on the link that I posted, you'll see that it's available, all the versions.
Yeah, this is the new cover. This is the cover I really wanted to do initially, but I gave that publisher so much, I didn't want to knock their brains out trying to get them to understand what I need to do. And I was tired by then, so I decided to go with just the one photo.
Okay. John Podlaski says that he should finish the book tonight. He started part 4. Now that was another thing I wanted to bring up, was the way you divided the book into parts. Kind of what gave you that idea to do that?
It was just because I wasn't a book writer. I didn't know what the rules were. I just knew that I had to write this book, and I knew that I had never seen anybody else with a book like this. And as it turned out, someone just called it a narrative history. The guy at the Detroit Public Library that invited me down there to speak to his group dubbed it as a Detroit narrative history. And that's my sister Connie, and that's my sister Joyce. And you all are on mute. So if you're trying to say something, you can't until they unmute you. I heard her moving her lips. So I said, just you have to wave your hands when it's time. So you have to just listen right now.
We will be opening the floor, Joyce and Connie, and you'll be able to talk to your sister. But right now you're muted because we're just doing our interview. So, you know, Shirley, even though all of this took place a long time ago at this point, it is history. In our current day, you know, with what we're facing currently, what message would you like to share that might be applicable through the whole thing to now? Do you see?
It's tiring. It's tiring, the racism that continues to go on in the country. So that's the reason I wrote the book, was because our history was about to get just destroyed. So there's just another kind of history that we always end up losing. And it relates to what's going on today, because they're taking that, you know, you were mentioning how upsetting it was taking down statues, but those statues represented a history that was not true. And those people were reacting to that. You want the truth, bring up history that's true. And books like mine are just part of the equation, just one part of the equation of the truth that needs to be told. No one knew about this except the Black community, and the Black community is dying out. You know, that was a part of that.
I think that's one of the things that you really expressed well in the book, was the separation, and how that you didn't know that there was a different world out there because of where you grew up. One of the things that I really picked up on in reading the book was your mother and her determination that her children have a good education. She knew that was so important, even though, you know, maybe, and then you described in the book about one episode where you had to be bused to other schools, and, you know, that whole thing, that was just such a crazy time period. But I think you expressed it very well in the book.
Well, they were busing us in the Catholic Church just like they were in the public schools, because there weren't that many Black Catholics. And so when we converged on the scene, they had to put us somewhere. So they bused us into the inner city. And then when they opened up Our Lady of Victory, I was able to come back and go to school close to home. My brother had to go to school outside of home at a very young age. And I used to worry about him. And I'm a little girl. And why am I worried about my brother? But I did, because he wasn't close to us going to school like he once was.
Right. And I think you said he had to ride a train.
No, he had to ride a bus.
A bus,
to get to school. But there were other kids with him, I believe, that went to these elementary Catholic schools as well. If we had tried to go in our neighborhood, we had an elementary school in our community, public school. But when you got to high school, they bused us because they would not let us go to the high school in the area. I mean, this is how crazy stuff was in this Black community. And so my mother didn't want us to be a part of that. So she pulled us out of that and put us in the Catholic environment so that we can be educated without being bused somewhere, and ended up being bused anyway initially. So
I think she was very wise, and that came across. It really did. It was very important to her that her children be educated. She knew.
Well, she saw a little boy walking to school every morning, and she wanted to know who that little boy was. So she stopped him one morning and asked him where was he going, because he was dressed up in a shirt and tie and his blue pants, and you probably have read that in the book. And she asked him, where are you going? And he told her he was going to Our Lady of Victory. And she immediately went up there and got enrolled in the catechism classes, because that's what the parents had to do in order for their kids to go to the school. And she ended up becoming Catholic. My father didn't, but she ended up becoming Catholic. But that little boy evangelized her, because they didn't come into the Royal Oak Township community to get people to go to this school.
Right.
She just saw this little boy and she wanted to know where he was going.
Right. I'm going to go over to the chat window. We have a lot of comments. Some of these questions I want to, when we open the floor, I'm going to let you guys actually ask your own questions. But let's see. It says, Marion Beeman says, Shirley, I find it interesting you have been involved in community activism. Right now, I'm reading Michelle Obama's Becoming, recounting her work in community organizing. Marion also says, whatever she's baking is yummy. Nani says, it's that time of year when anything cooking brings us right to the holidays. So true. Rox Berkey commented, love, love, love that story, Shirley, and it was about you and Langston. And what a brave man to just say, hey, I'm going to marry you.
That was crazy. Connie was there when I met him too. My sister Connie. We're in Amway.
Nani also says, as if I don't have enough to do, my sister dropped groceries by for me to cook some of her Thanksgiving dinner for her.
Who said that?
Nani.
Oh my goodness. They know how to avail themselves of help, don't they?
No kidding. Rock says, what a vote of confidence, Nani. Linnea says, one of the best college classes I took was about Greek history because it incorporated the religious beliefs that gave me a taste of the culture, which is often left out of high school classes. That's another really good point about the way history is taught and how that things that are interwoven, like the religion part of whatever that culture was, it's left out. It's just not, it's not included. Pat wants to know, how long did it take you to write your Our Lady of Victory book?
I started in 2003, actually, and it took me to 2007 to get it published. Okay, so 2003, 2004, 2005, I was writing and researching and interviewing. And the rest of that time I spent trying to learn how to be a publisher. Which I think all of us can relate to.
Yeah, we have to wear different hats for sure.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that part.
Pat says, I have the book and I'm reading it along with two other books from authors from our RBC. She says, Shirley, you had spunk. I think that could be we'd all agree with that. Shirley has spunk. John has an interesting comment. He says, in 1969, I was the last graduating class in my Detroit Catholic school before closing. It only took several more years before they closed and tore down the church and school. However, it was also the same year that several other Catholic schools and churches closed. I kind of, and that same thing happened with Shirley in that eventually it closed and the church closed and the school closed and everything changed.
The school got torn down.
Right. Everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a lot of stuff in the chat and you might want to scroll down and look.
Yeah, I'm looking. What about, you want to say?
One thing Nani says is, well, folks, what I'm hearing from you all is that there's a lot of cover up in the Catholic community. Is that accurate?
Well, you know what? They apologized about a couple of years ago for all the crap that went on, because racism was in every aspect of life. It is every aspect. And the Catholic Church was no exception. Instead of being the moral authority, they were part of the problem. So they recognized that and wanted to try to make amends. But I say like this one politician used to say, you're a day late and $1 short in trying to rectify the situation, because the Catholic community has kind of been decimated. The Black Catholic community has kind of been decimated because of the policies that they had that weren't conducive to growing the community.
And Nani brings out another point too about not only cover up with maybe the racism, but also with the sexual abuse that has gone on. However, I want to add that that's not limited to the Catholic religion.
I know.
It's everywhere. It's
Mhm.
everywhere, and it's covered up. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Shirley, you're a lifetime member of our RBC. And so tell us your feelings about being a member of the club. What has it been for you?
It's been it kept the conversation going for my book, as I'm sure it's done for all of you. You're getting the kind of exposure that you wouldn't normally get if you're not a famous actor and writing on your name. It's just a wonderful way to keep your story alive. And it was the only way that my story even got any traction, because I was out there competing with hundreds of other authors, and we were all for ourselves. Everybody was not into helping anybody else. He was just trying to help ourselves, and that just wasn't going to work. So this community is my kind of community, because we help one another.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. You were fortunate enough to meet the late Catherine Treat. And how did she impact you and your writing and your determination? Maybe in writing your Crazy Hot and Living on the Edge book. How did she impact that?
Yes, she did. She was, as you know, she had her own health issues. And
right.
she was just worse off than I could have ever been. And I thought I was bad off at one time, but she tops everything that I was doing. So I was commending her, and I went out and bought her book, and I met her on Twitter. We weren't there was no club at the time.
No.
I just met her on Twitter, and her book caught my attention, and I called her up.
Wow.
And I told her I was going to do a review of her book when I got through reading it, and I did. I did a review. It's still on my blog post somewhere. And because I was just, what is it? I was just speechless by what was going on with her. And unfortunately, she didn't live that long because of the issues she had to deal with.
It's a shame we didn't have Zoom back then, where we could actually seen each other's faces.
Right. Well, we did have the photos. Remember the photos?
Right. That would have been.
Yeah.
I'm going to open the floor right now. If anybody has a question they want to ask Shirley or a comment you want to make, we're about out of time already. I knew this was going to zoom by fast. That's why we call it Zoom. But if anybody has anything they want to say, you can unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
I want to know why Connie has a mask on. Are you out are you outside your home, Connie? We can't hear you because your mute is on.
Well, actually, I'm at work and I'm not supposed to be on. I'm sneaking.
Okay.
Don't tell anybody.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, Connie. Yeah.
I have my break in a few minutes. I'm waiting for someone to come to relieve me, and I'll be out in my car, and then we'll just talk away.
Well, if we're still on, you can type in the chat room too if you have something to say.
Okay.
Pat, do you have anything that you want to say to Shirley? Unmute yourself, honey.
I'm going to say that I really just like the fact that you found a format without looking for one. You went with your gut feeling. That gut feeling is what makes this book, this narrative book, so great. You got to find your format, and then it just went wow. I find that absolutely fantastic that you took that risk and said, okay, I don't know how to do it, but you did, it came, it was there.
That's exactly what happened. I was flying in the blind. I had no experience. I had no knowledge of writing. So I said, God, please help me. And if it's your will for me to do this, I will do it. And it just kind of came together, It was crazy how it came together because I was not an experienced writer. So
fantastic, Shirley.
Yes, John.
Oh, I just
Hey,
wanted to
Shirley,
eat the seed.
in your auto in the book, it did mention that you worked for a newspaper. And I found that reading through the book, as Pat mentioned, your format, it was more like a magazine article, or a newspaper article.
Really?
That, the format that you used, and
Maybe
it
that's
was
what it was.
unusual, but it was just like a compilation of all of these magazine articles that were thrown together and put into a book format.
You're talking about Our Lady of Victory.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
And Pat shaking her head, so she must agree with me.
And I kind of do too, John, because it was the way it was in such chronological order. And then at the back, then where everything was dated, it was, I mean, it literally could be used to teach a class.
That was
really good.
that was the purpose as well, to be a kind of a teaching tool. And I also wanted to put in these, how you put these meanings of words in the book,
Yes,
glossary.
Yes.
I would have had to hire somebody to do that. So I wasn't able to do that. And it was too much for me to try to do myself. But that was another aspect that I wanted to add to the book.
Right. Any other questions, comments? You'll have to
You're on
unmute
mute.
yourself, Joyce, sorry. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I like my sister's book. What's that book you wrote, Shirley? The one where you going through the change?
Oh, the Crazy Hot and Living on the Edge.
Yeah. Now I like that one because I did not know my sister was going through that because I didn't.
Wow.
I hardly even had a change. So when she told me all this and her body was going through all that, I could not believe it because it didn't happen to me. Aren't we sisters? I thought we supposed to share stuff like that. I couldn't relate to what she was going through, but she was going through something else. And
well, it became physical. You get physical.
right.
You get physically ill. My first husband made me physically ill.
Anyway,
I was allergic to him.
It was just a revelation to me to know that she took it upon herself to write a book about it.
Well, so actually, that takes courage. And this Nani Jules was the one that kept pushing me to do it, but I wasn't prepared to write that book at all. And it was tough because I wasn't prepared. And I hadn't written anything down. It was all in my head.
It does take courage. It does take courage.
She's well now because she was not really doing too well for a good while.
Yes, Joyce was worried about me because physically I was deteriorating, and she was worried about me and my friends. What's going on, Shirley? What's wrong with you?
Didn't Carol say to you, Auntie, what's wrong with your eyes? Didn't Carol say something too? My daughter.
Carol, well, I started juicing and I started to flourish. And my face was the first, you could tell that something was giving me energy and strength. And she looked at me, she says, Auntie, you look so vibrant. And I said, oh my God, I must be on to something juicing, because the juicing, I had to get nutrients in because I had a lot of digestive issues.
You cut your hair off? You cut your hair off?
Yes, I did. I had to.
Girl, you know what we think just alike, because I was thinking about cutting my hair off.
Well, I had to because those locks were growing out.
Turn to the side. Let me see your profile.
That's sisters for you.
Honey, I don't know what style you got on your head.
Langston cut it for me.
Okay, ladies, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to move on, and because we really are out of time for this show.
Well, can I say one brief thing where I had wrote a story long years ago? I had wrote a story years ago. It was real quick. I was afraid of dark things. So
She
I was going to join this writing school, and I had to send in a story. So I sent in that story about how my mom had to go out in the hot sun because I would scream and she'd go in the trees because they looked scary. And so she had to walk out in the hot sun because of me. And then in the end, my brother used to chase me with black boots, black combs, anything black. And I was scared of it. Then at the end of my story, I say I looked in the mirror and I saw that this person was black. So why am I afraid of dark things? And that was the end of the story. But they said I was at a high level when I wrote that story. They wanted me to be a writer, but I said, oh, I don't want to do that. So we just come from a family of writers.
Yes, we did. My mom was a
Sure.
writer, and she wrote poetry and she did short stories. So I guess it was inevitable that I was going to make a stab at it.
And
Oh,
kind of
sure.
goes back to that, to her determination that you have an education.
And
Yeah.
what's
Can
your
I
name?
say something?
Shirley didn't introduce us to you. What's your name?
Who?
The lady that's hosting you. What is your name?
My
Jan.
name is Jan Sykes.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, Joyce. Thank you and Connie for joining us.
We were not.
Can I get a word
formally
in? I'm always the sister that's the last to get a word in.
introduced.
But this is what I want to say. Shirley, you made a comment about saying that you was an inexperienced writer. Well, you come from a family of writers. Don't sell yourself short. You had one of us was going to write a book eventually. So don't sell yourself short. You was
Right.
born into writing.
Yes.
Writing is the family middle name.
Shirley
Yes.
is a writer. We're so happy you guys joined us. Thanks everybody for coming. We're out of time, so we're going to let Jan close. Everybody have a great day. Jan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nani.
You're
So
welcome.
we need to pay tribute to our sponsor today, who is actually the regular host of this show, Wendy Scott. And our sponsor is her book Slimmer, which just won the RRBC 2020 KCT International Literary Award. So I just posted the purchase link and I'm going to read the blurb because we don't have a video to go with it yet, but we will. So the blurb says, an unexpected wedding invitation spins Pippa's world off its axis. The bride-to-be's sexy brother, Alex, is sure to be there. 7 years ago, he jetted out of Pippa's life, oblivious to her teenage fantasies. This time, she's determined to lasso his heart. The calorie countdown is ticking. Pippa has only 10 weeks to become slimmer. If you've ever struggled to lose a few unwanted pounds, you'll empathize with Pippa's theatrics. And I can tell you from reading that book, it was very entertaining. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today here on Zoom. Once again, thank you to our guest, Shirley Harris Slaughter, for sharing her book with us today, Our Lady of Victory, The Saga of an African American Catholic Community. Listeners, your honest reviews help authors grow. So please post your reviews where you purchase your book and share on your social media platforms so other readers can find these books. So for now, this is your host, Jan Sykes, thanking you for joining us today for Bring on the Spotlight, a Rave Waves production. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Rave Waves on Zoom, where all things literary are our passion. Shirley, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Everybody, thank you for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. And we'll see
Thank you
next time.
so much. Thank
Until
you so
next
much.
time, happy reading.
Bye.